It's funny because when you reflect back in that moment, I didn't see it as something big. I just saw it as like an opportunity. When I saw inklings of an opportunity to be like, I could give someone a response straight away to all of those questions.
And that's actually an interesting insight, because I think what you're saying is like, it's not that you saw the future perfectly, it's that you saw the opening and you pursued the opening and then you kept learning more as you went further.
100%. I think what the biggest fundamental shift for me during the introduction of AI has been that I get to focus more on quality, which is what I really cared about the most.
What's the worst piece of conventional wisdom you've heard so far about how to roll out AI?
Honestly, I think
I am really excited to welcome to the Squawk Jared Ellis from Culture Amp. Jared, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to have a chat today.
Thanks. As you know, in these episodes, we really do three things: learn a bit about you, deep dive on kind of one really interesting topic about how you lead in support and customer experience, and then we have a lightning round at the end. And so let's dive straight into chapter one. Can you quickly tell us, what is Culture Amp, what do you do, and what's your role there?
Yeah. So Culture Amp is an employee experience platform. So our mission is to make the world of work a better place for all of us who work in a company. And we do that through things like measuring engagement, how engaged employees are, and then how companies can take steps to make that experience better. We also do things across development, how people are professionally developing, where they can focus. And of course, the all important performance measurement, how well are people doing at the jobs that they are there to do as well. So a really holistic employee experience platform. It's got a lot to it, which is really great. My team gets to work with HR professionals, people who are really passionate about people, which is always a lovely space to be working in from a professional capacity. So my job is to lead our customer-facing support team. We look after all of the questions and queries related to how our product works, how they can get the most out of the product, and of course, help out when things go not to plan, let's call it.
And Culture Amp, definitely kind of a legendary company in your space. I've had the pleasure of being a manager at two companies in a row that were sort of religious about people in management roles reviewing and looking at Culture Amp data. So very critical for understanding how businesses work. In terms of your role kind of leading customer experience there, how did you get to where you are? Like, what was the journey that led to this? And I guess maybe the pointy end of your journey has been really being at the forefront of AI adoption in support, but what was the whole journey that led to deciding to be at that pointy end?
Yeah, you can't jump to the end, particularly these days, to talk about AI when it's been such a fundamental shift in the way that we approach things across the customer experience landscape. But casting my mind back to starting at Culture Amp, I'd always been kind of in the technical customer space across various companies and had the pleasure to join Culture Amp very relatively early days. We were just over 100 people when I first joined the companies, still quite early, but at that point globalized as well. And I actually joined as the first support specialist that we brought on at Culture Amp. The absolute pleasure, I guess, double-edged sword experience of not only starting as the first support person, but then also working out what support was in comparison to the other customer-facing functions we already had at Culture Amp at the time, and kind of picking that apart and really defining in the space what that looked like for Culture Amp, which was a really big milestone for me professionally. It was really interesting where you're trying to work out where the lines are drawn across responsibilities and how you maintain a consistent customer experience, even when those responsibilities are diversified. And from there, I kind of grew through and started building out teams and started to really make the support function and all of the various arms that then eventually encompasses with Culture Amp. And obviously, as you pinpointed, AI made its explosion onto the scene during my time here, which was really great, really challenging, but also a really big opportunity that I think we're all getting the pleasure of currently and over the last couple of years. So I was able to, with a lot of support from Culture Amp, I was able to dive in at very early days and really see how we could utilize this tool in order to fundamentally change our customer experience, I think for the better, being able to use it for where its strengths lay and really roll it out. So it's been a really fun journey.
Can we drill into that moment? I think one of the things that's interesting about your journey is I think you saw what was coming faster than a lot of people. And from my perception, at least, jumped on it in a very all-in way. What did you see? What was the thing that made you realize I want to go all in on this? And how did you get the support of a company to make that bet?
It's funny because when you reflect back in that moment, I didn't see it as something big. I just saw it as like an opportunity. I think the biggest challenge we have as support leaders is you want to help everyone. I think it's our inherent driving principle is oh, I wish I had more people. I wish I had more capability to help those people who are waiting in that queue or who don't even know that they need help, for example. It's one of those driving forces behind what we want to do. So when I saw inklings of an opportunity to be like, I could give someone a response straight away to all of those questions that are like, let's consider low hanging fruit. They're the basic, if I want to do this, how do I do that? I suddenly had a tool that we were definitely in a day of bot responses and like those interactions which were relatively stale, which has always been that kind of challenge of like, how far do you go down that pathway when you could be diminishing the experience? And I think I just saw out of amazement, as we all did, ChatGPT appears and you type in your question and suddenly it spits out this arguably pretty phenomenal response, even for at the time. And you go, my God, I could apply that to what these experiences are. And I could actually help people faster to get all of these questions done, which is going to leave me more space for my team, the experts, that next level, to actually answer the more complex questions. So I've never had a moment where I really thought to myself, I'm taking a big risk here. All I thought is, God, I'm unlocking an opportunity here to do the thing that I really want to do.
And that's such an interesting insight, because I think what you're saying is like, it's not that you saw the future perfectly. It's that you saw the opening and you pursued the opening and then you kept learning more as you went further.
100%. And I think we've learned that from bot and phone tree days. You don't really know how something's going to impact the experience for a customer until it's really live and you've actually got people with their hands on it, they're experiencing it and getting that feedback. So and maybe that's a little bit different for some people who like to be a little bit more risk adverse perhaps, and testing it and going through all those stages. I tend to lean on the side of looking for feedback, looking for the real life, real lived experience. So I knew when AI started to come, very early days, and it's amazing to reflect on it to see how rudimentary it was even at that point in time in comparison to what it is today. And even in that rudimentary state, I was like, I want to get this out there. I want to see what people think. I want to hear the feedback so I know how to then incorporate this in more or dial it back or use it for specific cases. I didn't have the answers. There's no playbook for this. We're all making that up at that point in time. The way that I learn the best is to observe it and get that live feedback. So that was really my approach. I think what's the biggest fundamental shift for me during the introduction of AI and moving towards a 100% AI first experience has been that I get to focus more on quality, which is what I really cared about the most. What are the level of experience that we're creating when two people are interacting? A support person from our side with that customer, that user, that really important person to us. How do we make a really quality, high value experience? And how do we measure that? And now I get to focus on that because from a volume perspective, I've now got a tool that can scale essentially infinitely if necessary.
So the timing style goals have sort of become freebies in many sense.
Yeah, I sometimes like to make the joke, actually our first response time is milliseconds because that's when every single person gets the answer. So if we want to measure against that, by all means, but I'm never going to better it.
Yeah.
Because theoretically they're getting that experience. We still measure things like first response time, post an AI experience, for example, and also in escalated scenarios as well. But still an important part of the tool set and of those measurements. But I get to pivot it a little bit to be like, that's not the headline metric that we need to tell people. What I want to sell and what I want our customers to enjoy is definitely the quality of experience, whether they've got that be with AI, and then conversely with our specialists as they move into that space as well.
And so I think that the thing that is interesting about what you've done is, so there's this transition from, just tracking, are we even getting back to people, to tracking, are we doing a good job? I think what I feel like you started to really unlock relative to a lot of leaders I've spoken to is how to measure the inputs from your team into whether those AI experiences will be high quality. I would love to kind of dive into that. I mean, you sort of talked about tracking things like how often are we updating articles, how often are we updating training or guidance. What does that suite of kind of inputs that you're tracking look like?
Yeah, a real key part of, before I look at kind of the tracking, maybe talking about the process, because a real key unlock for us when working with AI at such a substantial level was tending to how do you make it continuously improve when you don't have somebody sitting in that interaction who can actually identify what's going on. So we built a lot of systems and processes to kind of, how do we not evaluate every conversation, but how do we pick up when there is opportunity to improve those conversations? And a big part of that was really the idea behind having AI is for AI in a very short period of time to be able to help a customer to a high quality. And that means if it comes through to the team, we've kind of missed a mark to an extent. And the key process that we have is that every conversation that comes through from AI to one of the members of the team, they're, other than obviously helping that customer out in that conversation, they also have the added responsibility that they need to reflect on what was missing, why AI couldn't help in this instance.
The fence is not so much how to solve it or what was missing. Once we know what's missing, we're actually sitting at this control pane with a lot of knobs and dials. What's the optimal set of knobs and dials to tweak in response to this piece of feedback? And that's the piece of knowledge that's sort of in one team, as opposed to just broad knowledge about how to solve it.
Correct, because there is always a challenge of how it impacts other things. And that is the observation that's difficult to do on a conversation by conversation basis without that broader awareness. You don't want to be constantly piling on different ways for the AI to essentially interpret something that could then conflict and actually start to give negative result as a direct result of change.
The example I would give people is if the feedback on a particular interaction was it lacked empathy, you need a bit of global reasoning about, is that feedback about all the interactions, or is that feedback about the empathy in response to a really particular circumstance? And depending on your conclusion, you might change the training of the AI quite differently.
Exactly. It's really important. And you can muddy the waters as well when it comes to context. If you throw into AI equal parts answer A and equal parts answer B and they conflict, it's going to pick them against them optionally based on something that's arbitrary and maybe really hard to pick up and control.
Right.
So you have to be very careful that you're not
This
contradicting
global
yourself.
consistency across your instructions. Yeah.
So putting that into one team and bringing it to them to kind of finalize the delivery of that improvement allows them to be more consciously aware. But thankfully, we're not quite at that substantial level just yet. That's a challenge for tomorrow.
When you think about career design as between these two teams, is there, a consistent linear progression from sort of the frontline team into the AI tending team, or are these parallel tracks? There are some people who are going to become more and more subject matter experts in the direct customer engagement, and some that will be subject matter experts in tending the AI, and people could sort of choose to progress up either track.
I think they're parallel, at least what I'm witnessing at the moment. Some people have a real knack for a real capability in thinking in the way necessary to look at AI conversational design. And I think there's also a technical element to it. A lot of where AI is right now and kind of evolving into and what's becoming more prominent is starting to look into the operations side of things. It's starting to look into how do we connect to APIs? How do we connect to servers outside of that to bring in context live and on the fly that's personalized? That takes a technical understanding. That takes we're starting to enter into engineering world, which is, it's just fascinating to think about how much the AI world is developing into that space across everyone and what all of our knowledge is going to need to be in the future. It's definitely a parallel kind of track that would be similar to some people are very well equipped to go to a tier 2 or tier 3 team from a progression perspective in terms of how they expand their skills, or even going to things like specialization. And all of these can sit horizontally and you can move skill sets and train skill sets around so that people are progressing down to suit their strengths.
Maybe on the other side of that coin, in terms of that sort of tending to the AI team, one thing you'd started by saying was they all have the capability to solve the tickets. They've come from that background. Do you see that continuing to be a requirement? Like, do you think the career path is a lot of people will come in and be doing tier 1 support, and then some will move to tiers 2 and 3, and some will move to managing the AI? Or do you think people will come in and manage the AI who've maybe never done support before?
I don't have an answer, but it is a question that I definitely have had. And I don't know what is right. And I think it's going to be very determined based on time and what the needs are at any given point in time. It served us very well in the initial stages here where we think about rolling out AI initially, of utilizing the knowledge that we already had, because a lot of it is about product knowledge.
It's knowledge transfer. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Correct. It's really, really important. I think we're going to get to a world where product knowledge is just going to be so ingrained in our company-wide processes, and the acquisition of that to tend to the AI experiences is going to be so far-reaching and ingrained that it won't necessarily always be a requirement to have someone with that honed and well-ingrained knowledge to come in to look at these spaces, because they may evolve, maybe to my point before, of the technological kind of evolution of AI, where it is starting to interoperate with other systems and kind of take things on in a different way. That technical requirement may not need the knowledge requirements ultimately. It may not need that knowledge requirement ultimately, but will need a fresh perspective. I think at a certain point, we need to bring in fresh perspective as well. So that knowledge may not come with it, but the perspective and the next evolution maybe just as important.
And reflecting on the journey you've been on in reshaping the customer experience, but also reshaping the team and some of the metrics and what you track, what's the worst piece of conventional wisdom you've heard so far about how to roll out AI?
Slowly. Honestly, I think I've had a lot of conversations where a lot of people in support are thinking about AI because they haven't started that journey and they're thinking about it in incremental pieces. I think
Tiptoeing.
tiptoeing to an extent that, I will dive into thoughts about that I have about why that would probably be more challenging from my reflections. But a lot of organizations are thinking about it from that perspective. And I also find that a lot of organizations who are selling tooling to support these environments are also following a little bit of that advice too.
I agree.
Because they know that that's probably how you're going to net more people to be encouraged to do it to an extent. I think also if you're trying to evaluate AI, it's like trying to evaluate the capability of an AI model by only asking it one question. Is ChatGPT good? Is ChatGPT 4 versus ChatGPT 5 and in improvement? You're just asking it the same question. You can maybe set yourself up for failure to answer the question that you get the answer that you don't want to hear, because I'm pretty sure it'll be a very close relationship depending on the question between the quality of the two responses you got across different models of that particular provider. That's not taking into consideration the full depth of what the experience is. And you need a full evaluation across a broader spectrum before you can really establish where is its strengths and where is its weaknesses. And we all bring, as support leaders, we bring in knowledge of our own product and our own processes and technicalities of what we have to deliver on a day-to-day basis, which can be very beneficial. But I've been surprised the most when I kind of threw AI at something and it did really well.
Right, and it shocked you and you learned something new about the frontier. Yeah.
Exactly. I thought, I didn't have any idea, or I assumed that it wouldn't be successful in being able to differentiate these two really complicated points that I think are complicated and I would have been hesitant to do. But actually it surprised me because that's exactly what it's designed to do, is really get down into the grips of it. Yeah. I think the biggest challenge there is maybe relying on previous or preconceived notions of what is going to fail at and then try and mitigate the risk of that failure by doing it. What approach I think works really well is invest that time in the escape hatches. This is how I first described it to my leadership, my leaders at the time when I first tried to dive in. It's like, I'm going to go all in, but I have the escape hatches really well planned out. We are watching those conversations when we initially started up. We are basically have a person who's still going to pick them up because they're going to sit there and watch what the AI says. And if the AI goes off, we're going to pull that and we're going to put it with that person and we're going to learn from that. And then also, how do we set up the escape hatches knowing, well, we have this compliancy thing that needs to be exactly right. I'm going to let AI enter that conversation. I'm going to make sure the tooling can actually eject that automatically when these keywords are mentioned. Pretty much all of the tooling on the market today has the capability to kind of do that rudimentary level of, if says that, do this. And you chuck that across to the team. So you can put some parameters in, but you want it to enter first. So you can kind of see what that initial reaction is. So that you're learning from it. How do you bring it out? And I think we're about 2 years into our AI journey. And I think this last couple of months has been the first time that I've had my team kind of sit back a little bit and trust it a bit more from those escape hatches, because we still kind of had less full on, but kind of a way to keep an eye on what was going on in AI to make sure that it didn't misstep. And I think where AI technology is today, and also where we are in terms of our level of documentation, our level of conversation design, we don't quite need as much of that oversight. So we can start to redirect a little bit more, which is just an amazing progression from that initial state to where we are today. But I don't think we would have been here at this point in time without moving quickly as we can justify.
That makes sense. And obviously the results kind of are backing that up for you and your customers. Let's move to the third chapter of the conversation, which is a lightning round. A couple of quick questions. To start, what was the best support interaction you've had recently and what made it so good?
I think I'm going to holistically go over a couple of here, because I think my favorite ones are, I quite often like to jump in my role and just pick up a couple of conversations with customers to maybe bring this whole conversation together. My favorite are when a customer comes through and says, I just got this amazing response from your AI, but I wanted to double check and make sure that I haven't missed something here. And my favorite interaction is to be able to turn around and say, all of that information is exactly what you should run with. And you've got it there. And initiating, showing that trust with us as an organization and wanting to speak. And it speaks to the relationship we have with our customers, which is really close and nice, but also being able to reinforce that, hey, we gave you all that information and it is really great there. So I see them quite regularly, but that's one that stuck to my mind as the most recent one I picked up.
Nice. What do you think is the most underrated support metric, or sort of your hipster support metric?
I'm keeping this very AI, but we call it, affectionately call it RAW, but it's the rate of automated resolution. I think that it's still not a headline metric unless you're kind of really far gone down that path of AI. But that resolution rate from how many, it's kind of like a traditional deflection rate, but I don't see it as having that same negative connotation.
I agree. Which has a very negative connotation.
It has that negative thing. It kind of sits in that same world. But I love that effectively measuring the same thing has actually changed the interpretive meaning. What that says to me is that how many people we helped to substantially a really high level and really quickly. That's what that kind of says to me, which going all the way back to earlier in our conversation where I said, the key thing we want to do as support leaders is help everyone. I love that this is kind of reflective of that work overall.
And the good thing about those metrics is by and large, they should do a decent job of capturing situations where maybe someone left the interaction without it actually getting resolved, because we have tools now that can tell us whether that happened. And so it does feel better than deflection, where I think everyone knows those deflection metrics include a lot of customers just giving up, which was not what anyone wants out of the interaction. One of the things I've been very excited about with this is using it to get clarity about what we'd think of as content CSAT versus policy CSAT. So in other words, was this a good interaction where the customer was understood and heard and given a correct answer, but perhaps they were dissatisfied because they didn't like that answer? They weren't able to use a feature that doesn't exist yet, because those become very rich feedback back into the product and the organization about, what is it that people don't like? And I think traditional CSAT scoring doesn't give you that. It really just tells you where they aren't happy, and then you have to kind of manually figure out why.
100%. You've got to pick it apart. I think that's the biggest frustration I had with CSAT is my team were dealing with a lot of cases where they were getting these negative CSAT moments that were very driven by the product itself, product feedback, but even just in the industry that we work in, and I'm sure a lot of other industries will have similar to that, is we were dealing with people who were unhappy. We deal with employment milestones within people, and that could be onboarding, but that could also be exit. And it could be very interesting to see how people respond to. It's been really nice to kind of step out of that and use AI to actually reflect on the purpose why we're there, to help to create a great customer experience, and being able to narrow in on that also at a much higher volume as well. But to your product feedback portion, it's also great to be able to trigger into that and actually utilize AI to extract product feedback and get that to our product teams without basically any interaction whatsoever. I mean, the layers are kind of mind-boggling.
And finally, what is one thing that you would recommend anyone interested in customer support or customer experience should consume or read?
This is the podcast that I've been listening to a lot of, The Ticket, which is the Intercom podcast. I think Intercom's team has been doing a really good job at trying to bring together thinking about this space. And so The Ticket is a great one, I think, to speak to other leaders who are kind of doing that journey very early days. And also, I'm just a massive advocate of support driven, the community that is primarily out of the United States, but very globalized.
Yeah.
There's a lot of subgroups in there, a lot of work that they're doing to foster the conversations across support leaders. And it's so much fun to be a part of. And I would absolutely encourage everyone to get involved there, because we have to remember the biggest reflection I get whenever I'm talking to anyone about this is how little we actually know and how much of the unknown we are all in, but we're all in the same space. There is no one who is expert. No one is too far away. And we all have so many questions that are unanswered at this point in time. The only way we're going to get those answers or learn from those is if we're talking, if we're sharing conversations like this one, if we are seeing what works and experimenting and then sharing the results of that. So I'm a big advocate for opportunities like this where we can have a chat about it, opportunities given by communities like Support Driven. And I understand they just had a big conference in Las Vegas recently as well. And it's so great to see. It's really a great time for our industry as support professionals, and let's get involved.
Awesome. Jared, thank you so much for making the time and for being part of the Squawk. It was great to have you, and good luck with continuing to be at the vanguard of this revolution.
Okay. It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.